The wind moved like a restless spirit across the plains, whispering through tall yellow grass that stretched as far as the eye could see. Dust rolled along the trail in lazy spirals beneath a sky so wide it made a man feel small and forgotten. Daniel Cross rode slowly along the wagon road, his tired horse picking its way over the hard ground. Daniel's shoulders sagged beneath the weight of too many years of disappointment. Once he had owned a small ranch near the river, a place where cattle grazed and the nights smelled of warm hay and coffee boiling over the fire. But drought had come, and then debt, and the bank had taken nearly everything he had. Now he worked odd jobs mending fences, driving stray cattle, hauling freight when anyone would hire him. Life had turned him into a drifter, a cowboy who rode from town to town with little more than a saddle, a bedroll, and the quiet ache of a man who used to belong somewhere. The late afternoon sun hung low, staining the sky with copper and gold. Daniel expected nothing but another lonely stretch of trail. Then he smelled smoke. At first it was faint, drifting on the breeze like a memory of fire. His horse lifted its head nervously. Daniel narrowed his eyes toward the horizon. A dark smear rose above a cluster of distant cottonwoods. Smoke. He pressed his heels into the horse's sides and rode faster. As he approached, the smell grew stronger, burned wood, gunpowder, and something else that made his stomach twist. Death. 2 wagons stood broken beside the trail, one tipped on its side, the other burned nearly to its frame. Boxes lay scattered across the ground, their contents spilled flour sacks torn open, clothing trampled in the dust, broken dishes glinting in the fading light. The silence was the worst part. Daniel dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against gravel as he walked forward. Bodies lay in the dirt, a man near the wagon wheel, a rifle still clutched in his hand, a woman beside him, her dress soaked dark with blood. Another figure farther off near the grass. Daniel removed his hat. Lord, he murmured quietly, he had seen violence before. Outlaws, cattle rustlers, drunken gunfights in town. But this was something colder, something sudden and cruel. A wagon massacre. He moved carefully among the wreckage, checking for any sign of life, though he doubted he would find it. Then he heard something, a sound so faint he almost believed it was the wind, a breath. Daniel froze. He turned slowly, listening. There it was again, a weak, trembling gasp. He followed the sound to the edge of the grass where the tall stems bent and rustled. A young woman lay there half, hidden in the weeds. Her dress was dusty and torn, her dark hair tangled across her face. One sleeve was soaked with blood where a bullet had grazed her arm, but the wound didn't look deep. Her eyes fluttered weakly as she struggled to breathe. Daniel knelt beside her. "Well now," he said gently. "Looks like you're not ready to leave this world yet." Her eyelids lifted slowly. For a moment her eyes searched the sky as though trying to remember where she was. Then they settled on him. Fear flashed across her face. Daniel raised both hands calmly. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt you." Her lips trembled. They came from the hills. Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel leaned closer. "Bandits," she nodded faintly. "They shot everyone. Papa tried to fight them, but—" Her voice broke. Daniel glanced back at the scattered bodies. The man by the wagon must have been her father. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Tears slid from the corners of her eyes. Daniel studied the wound on her arm. The bleeding had slowed, but she was weak from shock. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Clara." "Well, Clara," he said, pulling a canteen from his saddle, "you're mighty lucky I rode this trail today." He lifted her head gently and let a little water touch her lips. She drank slowly. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried to move but winced in pain. Daniel sighed. "All right then." Guess we're doing this the hard way." He slipped one arm beneath her back and another under her knees, lifting her carefully. She was lighter than he expected. Her head rested against his shoulder as he carried her to his horse. He wrapped his bedroll across the saddle to make a softer seat and helped her sit in front of him. "Hold tight," he said. Her fingers clutched weakly at the saddle horn. Daniel took one last look at the ruined wagons. The setting sun burned red across the prairie like spilled blood. "I'll come back tomorrow and bury them," he said quietly. Then he turned his horse toward the distant hills where his small cabin waited beside a creek. Night settled over the plains as they rode. Clara drifted in and out of sleep against him. Every so often she murmured something half-formed words about her father, about the journey west. Daniel rode steadily through the darkness, the rhythm of hooves echoing softly against the ground. His cabin was small and rough, built, tucked in a shallow valley where cottonwoods lined a narrow stream. A few chickens scratched near the fence, and a tired-looking mule lifted its head as he approached. Daniel carried Clara inside and laid her gently on the narrow bed. The cabin smelled faintly of wood smoke and leather. He lit a lantern and examined her wound. The bullet had only grazed her upper arm. "Painful, but not deadly. Lucky again," he murmured. He cleaned the wound with warm water and wrapped it carefully with cloth. Clara stirred slightly. "You're safe," he said quietly. She looked at him through heavy eyelids. "Why did you help me?" Daniel shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing to do." She watched him for a moment longer before sleep claimed her. Daniel stepped outside and leaned against the fence, staring up at the stars. The sky over the plains was always beautiful at night, scattered with more stars than a man could count. But tonight his thoughts lingered on the girl sleeping in his cabin, a lone survivor from a massacre. And now, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, she was part of his quiet, struggling life. Morning sunlight crept through the cabin window. Clara woke slowly, confused at first by the unfamiliar room. The events of the previous day rushed back like a flood. The attack, the gunshots, her father falling beside the wagon. Tears filled her eyes. She pushed herself upright carefully. Daniel stood at the stove stirring a pot of coffee. "Morning," he said without turning. "You're awake." Her voice was soft. "Yes, ma'am." He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Best medicine I know." She managed a faint smile. "Thank you, Mr. Cross." "Daniel Cross." "I'm Clara Whitmore." Daniel nodded. "Well, Miss Whitmore, how's the arm?" "Sore, but better." They sat quietly for a moment. Finally Clara spoke. "My father and I were traveling west." Daniel nodded slowly. "Figured as much. Wagon train." "Yes. We left St. Louis 3 months ago." "What for?" She hesitated. Daniel noticed but didn't press. Instead he said, "I need to ride back and bury the folks from yesterday." Her eyes filled again. "I want to go." Daniel shook his head gently. "You're not strong enough yet." "But my father, I'll see to him proper." Daniel said firmly, "You have my word." She studied his face and saw only honesty there. "Thank you." Daniel saddled his horse and rode back to the massacre site. It took the entire day. He dug graves beneath the cottonwoods and placed simple wooden markers above them. One for the father, one for the others who had traveled with them. When he returned to the cabin near sunset, Clara was sitting outside watching the creek flow over smooth stones. Daniel dismounted slowly. "It's done," he said. She nodded, her eyes red but calm. "Thank you for giving them dignity." Daniel shrugged awkwardly. "Just what anyone ought to do." Over the next few days, Clara slowly regained her strength. She helped cook meals and feed the chickens despite Daniel's insistence she should rest. They talked during the long evenings beside the fire. She told him stories of the East busy cities, elegant houses, fine dresses, and music. Daniel listened quietly, amused by how different her world had been. "You must think my life sounds terribly dull," he said once. Clara shook her head. "No, it sounds honest." One afternoon Daniel returned from fixing a fence to find Clara studying a folded document at the table. She looked nervous. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. Daniel leaned against the doorway. "Well now, secrets usually make life interesting." She hesitated before speaking. "My father and I weren't just traveling west." "Oh, I was going to marry someone." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Mail order arrangement." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Happens more than folks think out here." Clara looked down at the document in her hands. "But that's not the whole truth." Daniel waited. "My father was a banker." She continued quietly, "A very wealthy one." Daniel straightened slightly. "And when he died everything passed to me." Daniel blinked. "Everything?" She nodded. "His businesses land nearly $100,000. Daniel let out a low whistle. "That's quite a sum." "I never told anyone on the wagon train," she said, "not even the man I was supposed to marry." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "Well, Miss Whitmore, seems I picked up the richest passenger on the whole frontier." She smiled faintly. "But you didn't know that when you saved me." Daniel chuckled. "No, ma'am. If I had, I might have tried look in more respectable first." For the first time since the tragedy, Clara laughed. Days turned into weeks. Something quiet and warm began growing between them. They rode together along the hills, repaired fences, shared simple meals under wide skies. Daniel found himself smiling more than he had in years. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clara spoke softly. "I never went to meet the man I was promised to." Daniel nodded. "Reckon that arrangement might have changed." She looked at him. "Yes, it has." He felt a strange tightness in his chest. "What will you do now?" Clara stepped closer. "I think I already know." The wind moved gently through the grass around them. Daniel searched her face. "You sure you want a life like this?" He asked quietly. "It ain't fancy." She smiled. "But it's real." Daniel took her hand slowly. For the first time in a long while, the struggling cowboy felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope, and neither of them knew yet that the lonely rescue on a dusty trail had changed both their destinies forever.